Welcome, you're watching Head to Head. I'm Antonina Antosha with UATV. The World Economic Forum annual meeting 2019 came to an end last week after 5 days of brainstorming by over 3,000 leaders. The organizers said the event this year made an impact on the world in as many as 33 ways. How effective was the forum for Ukraine and what Ukraine-related issues were discussed at the meetings? To talk more about this, we're joined in the studio today by Maksym Prazdnikov. He's a Ukrainian economist and a former CEO of Logitech in Ukraine. Hello, and thank you for coming.
Hello.
So as I have already mentioned, World Economic Forum in Davos is an annual meeting, but this year the delegations were kind of different because some of the prominent world leaders did not make it to the forum. I mean, Trump, because of the shutdown in the government situation, Macron, because of the yellow vest protests in France, and also Theresa May, because of the Brexit controversy. Now, did that affect the usual procedure of the Davos World Economic Forum?
Well, of course, the main point for this economic forum was absence of many participants. If you compare it, for example, with the previous year, when American delegation was the biggest one, it was leading by Mr. Trump. This year, they didn't come at all because of this shutdown you've just mentioned. As well as Theresa May, Macron, and Xi Jinping, they didn't come at all. So, and there was a lot of discussion because of this. Doesn't mean that the economic forum is losing its power. It's not so interesting for participants, and etc., etc. So in my understanding, I believe that it's not. It still has a lot of power and still has a lot of people coming from world leading different worldwide companies, CEO from world companies, and a lot of other presidents, a lot of other influencers, so-called came. And there was different, for sure, certain reasons why those people didn't come. Mr. Trump, Mr. Macron, and that was very strong reason, actually. So, and I believe that next year we will see participation of leaders of these countries. And this is the first statement. If we're talking about Ukraine, it was an interesting story because it's second year in a row that there is so-called Ukrainian house in Davos. And this year, I think that there was a record number of participants from Ukraine came to Davos. And actually,
so
we are not talking.
This year's meeting in Davos was prominent for Ukraine.
Yeah, and actually, we are not talking only, of course, about official delegation like President of Ukraine, Minister of Finance, and etc. And those candidates, potential candidates for president's elections. But there were a lot of private persons coming to Ukraine. Head of local Ukrainian companies looking for some meetings and just interesting in economic forum as it is. And in total, as far as I know, there were several hundred of people. And Ukrainian delegation. In Ukraine, I wouldn't call this Ukrainian delegation.
Okay,
it was
on
like
Ukrainian
official
side.
delegation. Yes,
okay.
Absolutely, on the Ukrainian side. And there was a lot of different conferences, different meetings during these days in Ukrainian house. And if you're talking about global forum, not so many people from Ukraine did participate in official global forum in Davos, but there was a lot of, on the contrary, on the other side, there was a lot of meeting in Ukrainian house. And most of discussion, of course, about investments, about energy, it was exactly in Ukrainian house. And those news which we already heard, that there was a preliminary agreement for 1.5 billion with Norway, with France. And we expect certain investments in renewable energy, in sun energy, in wind energy. And it was already announced that we have approximately for 800 million contracts signed. So this is, of course, it's a good news in terms of investments. On the other side, of course, we would like to hear a little bit more about investments not only in renewable energy, but in some production, in some new facilities, whatever. Because actually, Davos Forum, the main idea of Davos Forum, it was globalization 4.0. And talking about this, unfortunately, we couldn't say right now that Ukraine is on the track. So we are not so far a big part of the world economy, unfortunately. Despite of our geographical position, despite of our natural resources, despite of our population of almost 40 million in total, which one of the biggest country in Europe, we are far behind of the normal level of GDP, of even average GDP in the world. And this is our main aim, to have some investments, not only in agriculture, not only in renewable energy, but in other industries as well.
As you have already mentioned, the main theme of this year's Davos Economic Forum was globalization. And this is not the first time Davos meeting is dedicated to this particular topic. The same topic was announced
last year.
2 years ago, in 2017. Now, why is it so? Did the world leaders and the influential people did not manage to cope with the issue throughout the 2 years?
Well, what we saw within the last 2 years, one of the main issues right now, and it was also actually discussed during this meeting in Davos, it's a lot of protectionism, it's a lot of populism, it's potential trade war between countries. So it's not about globalization at all, actually. It's more about kind of nationalism of each country by itself. And we saw that there is a lot of tension right now as for the global trade, as for the countries trying to protect themselves from from export and from import, and we can see that this tension is actually increasing. And the main point, what also was announced during the economic forum, IMF, they had their forecast as for the world economic growth for this year. Previously, in April 2018, it was 3.7%. They expect the GDP growth worldwide. Then in October 2018, they decreased their own forecast for 3.6. And during this forum in Davos, they decreased it again to 3.5. So they are really worried about slowdown in economy. They're worried about potential trade war between United States and China. And definitely this will affect the world economy as well. And it's not about globalization, unfortunately. So they didn't reach the world didn't reach the target which was set in 2017 right now. And we see it.
It's been mentioned that 33 ways of influencing the world for the better has been thought through during the Davos Economic Forum. Now, what number of those are dedicated to making the life better in Ukraine?
You know, I'm not sure if
there was 33 of them. Okay.
If there is a story about
making
life better in Ukraine. As I just mentioned, unfortunately, talking about Ukraine in terms of world economy, we are not a subject. We are kind of an object. We depend on the world economy.
Were Ukrainian issues on the agenda?
It was discussed, definitely, but it wasn't discussed on those levels which we would like to talk further. Mainly, but the World Forum, mainly its economic side. If you're talking about some political discussion, there was a kind of short presentation of 3 main candidates for the president elections. And it was not kind of discussion between them. Each of them have certain period of time, and they made a kind of their own presentation to people, to participants of this conference. And 3 of them, actually, it was our President, Mr. Poroshenko, Mr. Tymoshenko, Mr. Gusenko. They have 5 and 10 and 15 minutes to discuss what they expect further from this economic forum and what are their expectations from Ukraine. And it was like a start of election campaign and start of potential debates between them. So it was a kind of combination, both economy and politics. But coming back to discussion about potential influence for Ukraine, as I just mentioned, we really depends too much on the world economy situation. We are mainly a country dealing with raw materials, unfortunately. We are not producing end products, so we are dealing with agriculture products, with metal industry products. So we really depends on price on commodities in the world. And if there is a kind of a trade war between main countries like United States, like China, if European Union will participate in this potential trade war, definitely this will lead to decreasing on economy, and Ukraine will be one of the countries who will suffer the most, unfortunately, because of this. And this will influence both GDP growth, exchange rate in the country, potential salaries, and etc., etc.
Naturally, global economy influences the economy of each and every country represented in this world. Also, the internal and external relations influence the economy, right? So what about the Russian aggression in Ukraine? Has that been mentioned during the forum? Because I know that German Chancellor Angela Merkel has discussed the situation in Mariupol and the Azov Sea. Yeah, absolutely. It was also on the table, and it was also kind of discussion. And besides of that, there was discussion about Nord Stream, of course. Pipeline. Yeah, and actually we heard already a position from the Germany side, and they confirmed that they have still have interest in finishing this project. We have United States on the other side who is against the project, and it's still under discussion. But my personal opinion, I think that it will be finalized. And after all, we will have to deal with this, and there will be an issue, potential threat for Ukrainian gas transport system. And definitely we will lose some potential incomes from this. Do you agree with Angela Merkel that it's purely economic project, not political one or geopolitical one?
Well, there is no pure economy or political project worldwide. It's a both. It's kind of combination. Like the International Monetary Fund, a lot of people saying that it's pure economy. It's not. It's about combination. It's geopolitics, it's economy, it's politics. So it's kind of both combination. And definitely it's not only about economy. And we should understand that I can understand position in Germany. Their interest is to receive gas with no interruption, with a competitive price, to be secured, and not depend on a potential fight between Ukraine and Russia. So their position is purely understand. But we should understand that our position could be a little bit different. Our interest is to keep this gas transport system, is to keep transit gas from Russia to Europe through our actually system. And this is what we should try to protect. Will we succeed on this or not? I'm not sure right now.
Okay. Well, hopefully everything is going to be fine. Thank you so much for coming and enlightening us on the main issues discussed during the World Economic Forum 2019.
Thank you.
That was Maksym Prazdnikov. He's a Ukrainian economist and a former CEO of Logitech in Ukraine. Thank you so much for watching. Stay tuned with UATV for more.